of angels in the Casey Mara Foundation, we're this little speck in the universe. And he's taken time out of his busy day, not only as the employee assistance professional for the Philadelphia Phillies, but he does interventions, volunteer work. I think he was doing meals today. You would think that with the Philadelphia Phillies, his time would be all used up, but he finds time to help the little communities, the little people who are trying to do something. And for him to come out is just so special to us. And I don't know if he's going to share it during his talk, but he does have a previous connection to Mercer County and the Sunshine Foundation, so he's no stranger to this area. However, he did take the time to come down. So, as I said, he's the employee assistance professional for the Philadelphia Phillies. He is out on the circuit for many, many years. He's an interventionist. He helps people get into treatment. One of the things that, if you read about Dickie Noles as a pitcher for the 1980 World Series Phillies, and I was at one of those games. He's best known for a brushback pitch that still to this day is talked about. So I'm not going to take too much of his thunder, but I'm going to just turn and give the floor to Dickie Noles.
You know, Kevin, I got to tell you, the only people call me Dickie Noles is Harry Callis, and he's gone, and my mother, and she's gone too. So I haven't heard Dickie Noles in a long time. My real name is Dickie, and that's one thing I didn't ask my mother when she named me Dickie why before she passed away. But when you grow up with a name like Dickie, you can get in a lot of trouble when you're a young first, second, and third grader, and then put Noles on it. So I won't go there. But anyway, you know, this morning I am supposed to be feeding the homeless this morning. It's one of the things that I love doing more than, and there's nothing that would take me away from the event we have with the Phillies this morning, because one of my roles there with the homeless is I come in early and I talk to the homeless about drug and alcohol. As a matter of fact, I was working with Gadenzia and different people in the shelter that we were, the Brothers Shelter this morning that we were dealing with long before the Phillies got involved in feeding them. And I will come in the morning, we'll cut the food up, get the turkeys ready, and then the Ruben O'Maros, the Ryan Sandbergs, and David Montgomerys will come in and feed them later. But by then, they don't realize that I've already talked to many people that are battling addictions. I am a recovering alcoholic, and as Carmen just let me know, that I'm 30 years and how many days now? You're counting them more than me. April 9th of 1983. So I was with Carmen right before that. It was great. And myself and Carmen sat on the Pennsylvania Board of Drug and Alcohol. Is that what it's called now?
Governor's Advisory Council.
Governor's Advisory Council now. But anyway, so being committed to this is very easy. It's not being committed to it for me. Anyway, let me just back that up. It's someone that reached out and helped me, and it overwhelmed me when it happened. And you heard Kevin talk about, this is where I started doing drug and alcohol talks. And when I first got traded from the Texas Rangers to and came back and signed with the Philadelphia Phillies and came up here, and I left Texas, I got the commissioner's office off my back. I had played with the Phillies. We won a world championship, went to Chicago, ended up in Texas, and then, you know, had to do all this community service work after April 9th of 1983. And then I finally got out of there, away from Bobby Bragan and people like Norm Sanja and Zig Ziglar, people that were trying to tell me that, you know, you had a story to tell. And I finally got out of there, and I ended up back up here because my wife's from this area, and I thought, great, no more talks. Because for me at that time, even though I was going out and giving a message, I really thought that a person that had the addicted problems like me that shouldn't be talking in schools. And I've done over 3,000 school presentations, and I really thought, I don't want to do that no more. And I ran into Joe Leck and Marianne Blamowicz and some of the wonderful people around Trenton, and they said, I did DARE programs all over here. As a matter of fact, this police officer may not realize it, but you know who invented the DARE card, baseball cards for you? You're looking at it. You'll never read that, but in 1984, Bobby Bragan came to me because all the police officers were signing my baseball cards in schools. We were doing DARE programs. And DARE programs were programs that I backed for many years because I liked them, and I developed a program off DARE. And of course, I ran into many, many, many different wonderful people, yes.
I actually knew that you did that because I just graduated DARE school on Friday.
Oh, is that right? Fantastic. I love DARE officers. I started my whole program off DARE, and it's called SAVE, Students, Attitudes, Values, Education, and Substance Abuse. But as a recovering person, I just want to share a little bit this morning. You know, I battle, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't hear someone that needs treatment. And if we really, I just spoke to the family downstairs. This morning I missed a home loading up the turkeys because someone showed up with a problem. And you know, we have an epidemic in the United States of America. I do prison ministries too, and that started up here. You guys started everything I do. And so when I go to prisons, it's very interesting. I'll walk into Graterford, some of the prisons, and I'll walk in and I'll hear, Mr. Noles, can I be in your program? I wouldn't have shot my brother for that cocaine. And I'm, Mr. Noles, if I wouldn't have been on, I wouldn't have stole all that stuff, wouldn't have robbed that bank, man, but I was having withdrawal so bad, I would have did anything to get out of it. And it's amazing how much you hear in a prison, and I wonder how many people in Delaware County alone right now, Delaware County Prison, because I go there for a Wawa. I go to a Wawa right by there, and every morning I hear the same thing. We're loaded down. We have so many kids that shouldn't be here, but they got to be there. Why? Because they're committing crimes. And I just wonder how many of these people are getting the right treatment. I wonder in my heart if the treatment facilities out there today even have room, because it seems like every day this epidemic of opiate addiction, which we might as well just call heroin, is just right there in our lap. But you know what? If you go to work with me and you walk down a certain hallway until it happens in somebody's family, they don't even know what's going on. And then if you walk with me down certain areas that I'm in at the big corporate America, and I'm not going to name who they are. It's pretty easy to figure out who I'm referring to. I've been in baseball all my life, other than that, working in a Winn-Dixie grocery store. So, and you walk around and they do drug testing and they're involved, but they just don't think the heroin epidemic's going to hit us. Then when it does, everybody goes, wow. But it's out there. And we need to come, I'm preaching to the choir, but we need to come together and understand that I think recovery is somewhat of a miracle. And when I was in Trenton, New Jersey, not too long ago, I remember one story I was sharing with a gentleman downstairs because he's with the Sunshine Foundation. And I remember getting the call, being a former player. You know, when you're a former player, I'm a lot of former things, but when you're a former player, your career either does one or two things. It gets better or nobody remembers it at all. Well, I threw one pitch, Carmen, that kept mine alive. One pitch. Can you believe that? Otherwise, I wouldn't have known who I was. And so I'm working in a community service department with the Phillies, and the phone rang. And Kelly answered the phone, and she's out feeding the homeless today, and Kelly answered the phone, and she said, Billy Sample with the Sunshine Foundation? Sure, Dickie's right here. I know he'll go on another airlift. Now, when she answered the phone, I said, if that's Billy Sample, I'm not here. Because I just went out of Atlanta. I just went out of Chicago. I've been on so many airlifts. I have children. I told Billy, guess what? I have a family, and I'll do anything for these kids. I mean, I love this, but my back's killing me, and I don't think I can go on another one. We're getting near Christmas, dude. And the phone rang, and Kelly answered. Said, sure, Dickie, you got a young kid up in New Hope that loves the Phillies? I'm sure Dickie will come. And so I was on the phone going, yeah, Billy, I know. Yeah, I know. And it's December, so I'll go on the airlift. And we took 2 planes out of Trenton, New Jersey. You know, we have a lot of cops that do a lot of chaperoning in that area. So we get there, and of course we had the Dunkin' Donuts and everything set up. Wherever you have cops, got to have Dunkin' Donuts, right? So we had the Dunkin' Donuts set up. I'm out drinking my coffee, and I'm having my donuts. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, where's the kid? You know, and I'm awake now. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I drove up here. And then I don't see the kid, and they keep telling me about this kid. So we get on the plane, and as we get on the plane, they told me to wear my uniform. And I got to tell you something. Maybe I should have done an intervention on that gentleman this morning, because that morning I went to get gas, and it was starting to snow, and it's starting to sleet. And I'm getting gas in full uniform thinking, they told me to put my uniform on. I got my uniform on. And this guy looks over at me and says, are the Phillies playing today? No, that's okay. So when I got there, I realized what I looked like. I mean, Harry Carson and some other football players that came on airlifts, and they wore their top. I wore the whole dang uniform. I go, you know, I'm from the South, so I can get away with that, I reckon. So I'm sitting there in full uniform, and everybody's looking at me, and I'm like, the kid asked me to wear it, and they're like, yeah, okay. So now I get on the plane. I don't know where this kid Jackie is. And I get on the plane, I see him, he's going, hey, are you the old Phillies player? And I used to be blonde haired, so I knew that. You know, yeah, I get that a lot too. So I started walking towards you. And he looked at me, and he was very charismatic in his speech, and I'm thinking, I love John Truck, I love Lenny Dykstra, I love Darren Doan, I love Mitch Williams. And this was around 93 now, and I don't have my ring on right now, my World Series ring, so I kind of walked over to him, and I said, hey kid, they lost, we won. I'm with the 80 Phillies, dude. They're, you know, that's okay. But as I got close to him, he says, how does it feel to slide? I've been playing baseball a long time, nobody asked me that. And then he goes, do you believe in heaven? Now, I wanted to answer that, because I've got a lot of knowledge of that, at least in what I read. And then he says, my mother says when I get to heaven, I'm going to get a new set. And that's when I looked down and compassion overcame me. The kid didn't have any legs. All he had was 2 stumps. And I looked down and I found out later why, and he was eaten up with brain cancer. And I looked down at him. He goes, my mother tells me when I get to heaven that I'm going to get a new set of legs. And he's just going a mile a minute. And he said, you know, when I get up there, is there baseball in heaven? Nah, none of y'all can answer that. If there is, I'm going to try to play it again and do a little better. But as I looked at him, I started to answer his questions. I couldn't. And behind me was this 6'9" girl that lived in Philadelphia. Her name was Keisha. She lived on B in Allegheny Street. She had legs, but she had cancer, brain cancer, and she had cancer. It had eaten her spine up, and she hadn't walked in 3 years. And Keisha kind of gave it one of these, you know. Maybe she was an old Phillies fan. She kind of looked over and said, hey, stupid. Being from North Carolina, I answered her. She says, there is no heaven, there is only hell, and we're living in it. Well, I kind of thought that was a little bit difficult, and I kind of said, whoa. And she said, by the way, boy, if God wanted you to have legs, don't you think He'd give them to you by now? And I kind of gave her my rear end view. You know, I like Philly fans like the boo. I just kind of went on back to Jackie. And I got to tell you, my arms are not long enough to pat myself on the back. I took Jackie all over Disney World. We meet at the clock at 6 o'clock to take all the kids back. We had 2 airplanes then. And I'm feeling really good about myself. And I'd given him every dime in my pocket. And I take quite a bit of money down to Disney World on those trips because some of these kids they come from poverty. And I felt real good. We're loading back up on the bus to get on the plane to go back to Trenton. And then I hear her, that big 6'9" girl. Hey, stupid. I don't know why she referred to me as that, but she did. And she goes, you and that football player, get over here and help me out. And Big Mike, a police officer, state trooper from up in Delaware County, was carrying her off the plane. And he looked like the witch in the Wizard of Oz. He was starting to melt. So me and the football player ran over real quick, and we grabbed her. And she says, Mr. Knowles, can you believe this? There's a Disney World, and it's real. I was like, yeah. And she said, Mr. Knowles, when I get to heaven, you think God will let me build a magic kingdom? I went, wow. What a change of attitude this girl's had. Well, we get on the plane. Plane breaks down. 3 hours later, by the way, they never complain. By the time we land in the airport up here, not very far from here, and by the time we land in the airport, it's 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. It's snowing. The plane was bouncing through the air as we got ready to land. But right before we land, I had always heard that on every airlift there's a miracle. And I go, I'm a Christian man. I've been on all these airlifts. I've never seen a miracle. And then I kept hearing that word over and over. And we're about to land when that little girl, Keisha, called me over. And she said, Mr. Knowles, when you get everybody off of this plane, I'm going to walk off the plane. I said, Keisha, I believe in miracles, but I got a funny feeling that, I mean, if I want to be a doctor and I prayed about it to God, I think I'd wake up with a message in my own brain, go to 8 to 12 years of med school, whatever it is. I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, did I give you this feeling that you can just naturally do whatever you want to do? I mean, did I open my mouth? She goes, no. She goes, but you and that football player, all you got to do is hold me up, and I'll get the feel of walking. I thought, why didn't I think of that? So we land, we get all the kids off. She's in first class. We only got to walk from here to cabin. So I said, okay, let's go, girl. And she looked at me, and she said, my legs don't work. And I went, well, what are we going to do? She goes, hit them. I went to the football player. I said, you do it for a living. You hit them. Of course, he didn't want to do that. So she goes, hey, dummy, my legs don't work. So I started hitting them. And I'm hitting them hard, and we're profusely sweating in 25-degree weather. We got her to the front of the plane, and I look down, and there's a gap, because it's a charter. And I go, Keisha, how do we get you? Throw me. I said, throw you. We did. We held on to her. It bounced. 200 kids and their families had started to leave. Then Keisha looked at her 7'2" father at the bottom of the stairway and said, Dad, look, it's a miracle. I know what it feels like to walk. And all of a sudden, all those family members grabbed their kids, and they came back. There wasn't a dry eye in the place, including me. Her 7'2" father, eyes were just pouring as he looked up at his daughter, who went 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4 step down there and said, let me go, and collapsed into his arms and once again said, Dad, look, it's a miracle. I know what it feels like to walk. Did she really walk? No. Was it a miracle? You can be the judge of that. But what I learned from Keisha that day is life is a miracle. Our life, and sometimes we take it too we take it too much for granted. And sometimes in addictions, we judge those people, especially the opiate and heroin addict. They steal, they lie, they hurt, they'll do anything to get off of their, you know, and insurance companies make me so sick. They won't give you treatment sometimes when they're in the middle of their withdrawal so severe, and they go, well, they don't die from withdrawal. No, they don't die from withdrawal, they use from withdrawal. Can we get them in treatment? Well, they don't need treatment. And yet the addictive person out there really wants to be clean or sober. April 9th of 1983 was my 30th anniversary of being sober. But I'll remember when of 1993 to 83, I'd be really old then. I know I got gray hair, but my anniversary just passed. But April 9th of 1983 was the first day that I knew I was going to stay sober for any length of time, which at that point was 24 hours. I was drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies. Came out of North Carolina, given a contract. They brought me in. I had a great right arm. They set me down, and they told me, they said, Dickie, we want you to be a Philadelphia Philly. I remember the call yesterday, Dallas Green. You remember Dallas Green if you're a Philly fan. Dallas got a big mouth. He called me up and said, hey, welcome to the Phillies. I could hear him, you know, I held the phone way out here. I thought he was going to blow my eardrum out. And then I heard the next thing I heard from him, I could have heard him if I'd have set the phone down and went next door. I said, is that good? Well, Dallas Green let me know very loud and clear. Boy, anytime you get drafted, that's good. And he was not happy about that. And he said, you could have been a #1 draft pick. But anyway, Dallas Green drafted me, and I went on to start my career with the Philadelphia Phillies with one thing that I really didn't understand them trying to talk to me about was my attitude. And as they were talking to me about my attitude, I ran faster than everybody else. I ran harder than everybody else. I worked harder than everybody else. I played baseball 24/7. I threw a ball against a brick wall when I was 12 years old for 8 hours at night. What are you talking about attitude? What did I miss there? What they were talking about was my behavior. What they were talking about was what they had heard and what they had seen. This boy likes to drink, doesn't like school, he likes to smoke pot, he likes to get in fights, and yet no one had ever sat me down and talked to me about my behavior. It was always about, you need to have a better attitude. And so they drafted me, and my first day in Auburn, New York, I got arrested. But it wasn't my fault. I didn't run nobody over or shoot nobody. There was a fight. Well, I got to help my teammates out. Somehow in a fight, the Puerto Rican kid stopped fighting. The black kid from Compton, California stopped fighting. The kid from Texas stopped fighting. The kid from North Carolina wouldn't settle down. So he ends up in jail. Well, I got out of jail the next day, $25 fine, and hey, everything was okay. My coach brought me in and said, hey, you didn't sleep so well last night. That was it. Following year, I got arrested again, but you don't understand. I had always wanted to pull a fire alarm. We're in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And they had one of those fire alarms on a telephone pole. When I was 7 years old, I ran into one of them, and I've been at odds with them ever since then. Came home with a big lump on my head. My mother going, what happened? I said, I almost caught it. Caught what? The past. But then that daggum telephone pole got in the way with that, you know, that fire alarm on it. So at that time in my life, we always had roommates with the Phillies, and I love it. The Phillies were the first to do this. You couldn't room with your friends. You had to room with someone that was from a different country. I had a black kid from Compton, California by the name of Dennis Hawkins. He's a lawyer today. But everything Hawk talked about was in black and white, no matter what it was. He was into the civil rights movement, things like that. I knew he was going to be a lawyer. He should have been, I don't know. But anyway, I had another roommate from Puerto Rico. So we're out drinking, and we're walking down the street, and one of the guys passes out. And I'm over by the fire alarm, and I reached up and pulled it. Well, Dennis Hawkins was a little brighter than me. He said, you didn't pull that fire alarm, did you? And I said, yeah, but don't worry, it didn't work. He goes, it doesn't ring. It rings silently. And I go, well, no, they're not going to catch me and you. We're the two fastest guys on the team. They called us. They came up real quick. Now, Spartanburg, South Carolina, inner city is predominantly black. So I came up, you know when you're drinking, you come up with the best lies in the world. So I came up with a nice lie. There was two black guys. They ran out of the way. We tried to catch them. They pulled that daggum fire alarm. One had a pink shirt on, one had an orange shirt on. You know, get colorful too when you're drinking. Well, Dennis Hawkins looked at me and said, why they both got to be black? And the police officer almost bought it. And I turned to look at Hawkins and said, well, what do you want me to change? I said, Mr. Police Officer, I'm sorry, one was white, one was black. He started walking towards me. And he said, what color t-shirts do they have on? I forgot. So I looked at Hawk and I said, what color t-shirts do they have on? He said, white. And I said, why they both got to be white? We laughed. I went to jail. I got out of jail the next day, and people were laughing about my addiction. In Reading, Pennsylvania, I made it 4 years in a row. And Hampton Beach, I made it 3 in a row because I drove a Corvette down a one-way street. Got mad at a police officer because he pulled me over and said, because I'm young, got a nice car, you got to pull me over. He goes, no, I pulled you over because you ran 8 red lights. I said, that's a lie. He goes, you're going the wrong way, kid. So I got my first DUI, and then the following year I got arrested again. But this time, you know, all I did was urinate in the street. with 5 ball players telling me, Dickie, why are you doing that? You hadn't been in trouble this year. Can you go in the restroom in here? And the police officer who was sitting across the street rolled his window down and said, son, are you stupid? And I said, no, I'm writing my name. He didn't think that was funny. The next day I got out of jail. They had white adhesive tape in the clubhouse. Dickie, restroom that way. Don't pee on my shoes. And everybody was laughing. And then the next year I got arrested again, but it was turning violent now for a fight in a bar. Then there was a lawsuit, then another lawsuit. And if you want to go on the internet, you can read about me. It's about 99% true. I was kicked out of a country. 1980, we won the World Series. Pete Rose told me after we won the World Series, he called me over and says, now, Dickie, because see, in 1979, on July the 4th, I got called to the big leagues. And I made my major league debut right here in Philadelphia. And I was ready to go back home to Charlotte, North Carolina. Because see, when you're a professional athlete, all the kids that you grow up with are asking you when you're in the minor leagues, when are you going to make it? And you look at them like, dude, I made it. I got $30,000, signed a professional contract. I made it. And they're looking at you like, yeah, I know, but when you're going to really make it? So when you do really make it to the major leagues, you want to go home and kind of strut and tell everybody, guess what? You see me on Game of the Week, pitch against Tom Seaver. That's major league. But the Phillies wanted to send me to Venezuela. They didn't want me to go home. They thought going home, they may not get me back in one piece. So they sent me to Venezuela. You know, we talk about addictions, and like I said, we talk about what, you know, this whole marijuana thing drives me crazy. Talk to Darryl Strawberry about marijuana. Talk to Dickie Noles about marijuana. I would have never considered marijuana a drug. I remember the first time I tested a kid that was from California in our system, and we brought him in and said, you tested positive for marijuana? He goes, yeah, I know. And I go, well, that's not right. I said, it's illegal. He goes, where? I said, in our system, in Major League Baseball, and it's illegal in our country. He goes, not where I live. Then we called his father up and said, hey, your kid tested positive for marijuana. And the father went, God, I thought y'all scared me to death. And that was my view on marijuana. I didn't think it was a drug. Nobody ever told me it would lead to other drugs. Went to Venezuela, and all I was doing was smoking pot. All of a sudden, they pull out cocaine. They used the women over there to sell the cocaine to the ball players. And I said, I would never do drugs. I looked down on people who did drugs. Now I'm doing cocaine. I'm kicked out of the country at gunpoint because I threw furniture out a 6-story apartment window because I went out and got in another fight. At this point in my career, no one had brought me in and said, do you think you might have a problem with drinking? I had heard things like when you drink alcohol, such as beer, without drinking liquor, you're okay. I'd heard things as your Native American background. And I'd heard things like, if I look Indian to you, I got some land in Texas I want to sell you, by the way. But I did grow up with some Noleses who are Native American, but I wasn't. And so I'm hearing all this stuff about reasons why I would drink. And then finally, on April 9th of 1983, my third lawsuit happened. I went out to drink one last time. I'd had a drunk to come in to talk to me, Ryan Durham, and said, look, you've been sued, kicked out of a country, you've been arrested how many times, you've broken how many jaws? And they even sent me to talk to the great Muhammad Ali in my career. That's the honest God's truth. Muhammad came in and sat down, and I had never been so embarrassed in my life. And he looked at me and he said, so you like to fight, huh? And I go, yeah. I mean, I'm heavyweight champion of the world. I'm in, you know, good company here. And he goes, I said, well, not really. And he goes, well, he said, you're a punk. I went, whoa, this guy's being a little. And he said, do you realize I've never been in a fight? And I went, that's a lie. You fight for a living. He goes, out of the ring. And God didn't give you those things to fight with, those hands. And you hurt people when you fight. But he said the biggest problem with fighting is it's the most inhuman thing you can do. You lose total ability to control yourself. You lose your mental ability to control your body, your mind, and everything else. It's called anger, dude. You got to figure out what's making you angry. And I looked at him like, wow, this old fart don't know what he's talking about no more. And I just went back to my normal behavior. And on April 9th of 1983, after meeting with Ryan Durham, and he asked me to quit drinking for 1 week, which I couldn't, and I had went out for my last drink with somebody. I ended up at a bar, and he got in a fight. And then the next thing you know, I wake up, I'm on national television everywhere. I'd beaten up a police officer in a bar room brawl who got the call and says, that's Dickie Noles with the Cubs. I love that guy. I'll go out there, he told the other police officer. I'm a big fan of his. And he came out and couldn't get me to stop fighting, and I turned on him. Dallas Green and the Chicago Cubs finally sent me to a treatment facility. I'll never forget it. As I remember walking there just like yesterday, I said, I'm not going to treatment. And he says, well, you're suspended for baseball for life. I went into treatment. The third day I was in treatment, we had a little play that was going on, and I remember my counselor came over, a little psychotherapy thing. He said, Dickie, I need to talk to you. And I said, what is it? And he goes, you need to come in here because you're going to be the focus of this. We don't want you to think that we're picking on you. We're in treatment. We're in psychotherapy. And he says, I want you to be the center of this. Now, don't start snapping out. I'm sure he was kind of thinking, this guy might be a nut, but I was sober. And then he said, we're on a bus. And I kind of looked at him and said, I wouldn't be on a bus. I drive a Mercedes, dude. And you know, you forget where I came from poverty, and I'm sitting here bragging. And he said, well, you're on a bus, and it's a crowded bus. You're going by Wrigley Field. Somebody steps on your toe. And he came down on my toe with a bunch of cowboy boots. I drew back to hit him, and he put his face up near my fist and said, hit me. I said, I can't hit you. He said, hit me. And I said, I can't hit you. He goes, why not? I said, I'm already being sued for $1 million, $850,000. If I hit you, I'm going to get sued again. He goes, no, you're not hitting me because you're sober. I remember leaving that room that day, and I remember that was the first day that I started my recovery. I remember walking out of there, and I came, you know, the steps are magical. And you know, I was just talking to a kid yesterday. I said, nobody looks at the magic of the first step. Nobody really looks at it. But if you look at it, it's so simple. It's a genius that wrote it. You know, our lives have become unmanageable. Hey, Dickie, I think your whole world's unmanageable. But to admit that you're powerless over a drug, that's the first step to understanding you're going to have recovery. To understanding that after you get sober, recovery starts. So many people get sober, then people leave them alone. You have to let go and grow. I remember a phone call from my mother. My mother was a simple woman. My mother is my hero. She was raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, not very educated. My mother was raped when she was 13 years old, probably affected by drugs and alcohol more than anybody I've ever met in my life. And never had a drink and never had a drug. So it affects everybody. And my mother was raped by and I'm going to back off of it until I write the book, by we call a predominant man in the community. And once she was raped by him, she went home and her parents looked at her and said, have an abortion. Can you imagine telling your kid to have an abortion in 1956? It wasn't very easy. It wasn't simple. And it wasn't very accepted. But because of the person that raped my mother, of course my grandparents grew up, hated me because I must look just like my dad. But my mother had grown up in a religious environment. She never learned to read and write, but she heard Billy Graham. Now, if you come to Charlotte, North Carolina, there's two gods there. Daryl Earnhardt's one and Billy Graham's the other. But, you know, you got Billy Graham Freeway, Thruway, Highway, and then on the other side you got Dale Earnhardt Freeway. My sisters will argue with who's the most popular, but Billy Graham used to preach on TV all the time. And my mother heard him say one time, God knew you before you were even in the womb. My mother said, I ain't getting rid of this baby. And my mother preached to me as I grew up. All she ever preached to me was, God loves you, that makes you special. Greatest Christmas I ever had was in Philadelphia when she ran off and married her second man. When women hit trauma, they repeat it over and over. My mother married 4 different alcoholic drug addicts trying to fix them, but in reality trying to fix her life. But she would feel like she could help somebody else. One of the greatest women I ever met in my life. She is my hero. She took us Christmas shopping, and she took us Christmas shopping to tell us, back when I was in the 3rd grade when she ran off and married Donald Norcutt, you ain't getting nothing for Christmas, but we're going to go window shopping. Now, you've got a person that can make that sound good to a 3rd grader, you're a pretty powerful person. She was very positive. And I'll never forget that Christmas. My mother called me, and she said, I always felt like your addiction was my fault. And she said, now if you went into my mother's house, she loved yard sales, but she also had a memorial to Dickie Noles. You walked in and that whole wall would be pictures of me. And I'd say, Mom, that's the same one. That's the same one. She goes, yeah, but one's brighter than the other. My mother loved her son. I remember walking with her and she always said, God loves you, that makes you special. My mother told me when I was 10 and I first started playing baseball and I was terrible, I came home, my mother said, you're going to be a major leaguer. You're going to be the greatest there ever was. And I thought, yeah, Mom, you're crazy. But she threw me about 1,500 balls one day, and I hit one. She turned around just like that Kenny Rogers video. If you haven't seen it, it's a wonderful little video. She said, see, you are the greatest. And I went, Mom, you're crazy. But I started to believe her. And I would believe her. She said, you're the best, and God loves you, that makes you special. But here's someone that was traumatized herself. She called me up in the rehab. I got one phone call. You get all kind of phone calls a day. And I said, Mom, I'm in a rehab. I was devastated. My mother said, I've never been more proud of you than I have at this moment. And I'm thinking, Mom, I pitched in the World Series. You came up here. Some people credit me with winning the World Series. You took your picture on the field. She goes, yeah, I don't even like baseball. And I was like, wow. She goes, but I love my son. I started doing talks after I picked myself up and started in recovery on April 9th of 1983. And my mother, on her deathbed, told me one day, she goes, you know what I'm most proud of you about? I said, my recovery. You've told me 1,000 times. She goes, yeah, but I never told you this. What I'm most proud of, when I found out you're going around speaking to schools, and that's something I didn't want to do, she said, that is what I'm most proud of. My mother said, because I've watched this, and I've seen it destroy so many lives. as I close, just remember the miracle that we have in life. If we can touch another human being in some way, shape, or form, not just at Christmas time, but at all times, it makes us a servant of God in ourselves. But if we can help someone get their miracle of life back on track, it's worthwhile. Thank you, and God bless you.
You know, there's a lot of people out there that think Dickie Noles is a hero because he was a World Series pitcher. And he could have stood up here and said, hey, I'm the EAP professional for the Philadelphia Phillies. Hey, I pitched in 1980 World Series, but he stood up here and said, I'm in recovery. That's why he's a hero to me.